welcome to the February Hawthorne Huddle meeting. First, let me say Happy Black History Month. And then let me say our prayers are with the Nichols family. And then let me say I'm grateful to be here with Miss Ann and Mr. Al today. Mr. Clarence won't be joining us, but we do have a full program. And with that being said, Mr. Al, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm Al McFarlane. I'm the editor and owner of Insight News and a partner. My company, McFarlane Media Interests, based in North Minneapolis, in a proud partnership, a meaningful partnership with the Hawthorne Huddle and a variety of organizations and institutions in our community, all focused on creating, improving, growing quality of life, quality of lived experiences, growing opportunity for expectations to vault into the future with a sense of joy and purpose and with a sense of possibility and wonder. So we have been doing that kind of work here at Hawthorne Huddle for over 30 years. And kudos to Diana and the neighbors in the neighborhood for having vision, having faith, and for staying the course. And I think that as a group, we reflect a shared value and a shared confidence in our community and ourselves and our nation and in the world. So with that, welcome, welcome, welcome. Let us begin. We've got a great program today, and we're going to start, as we often do, with a update on COVID and other health concerns. Please welcome Luisa Pessoa-Brandao, who's the MSI, who's manager of epidemiology, research, and evaluation at the City of Minneapolis Health Department. Luisa, good morning.
Good morning, everyone, and happy to be here. We actually have seen a decrease in all of our numbers. COVID, RSV, influenza, everything has come down. You know, it doesn't mean that we don't have any activity, but it has definitely decreased significantly from what we were seeing in late December and early January, which is good news. It seems like maybe our influenza peaked early in relation to previous years. We had seen, normally we see our peak in late January, February, and we're not seeing that. Our ILI activity, so influenza-like illness activity in schools has reduced. You know, we're still seeing cases of COVID and flu and all of that in schools, but the number of outbreaks has been significantly reduced as well. So all in all, good news. Still, we want to keep saying, you know, prevention, an ounce of prevention is better than anything else. And so, you know, if you haven't gotten your flu vaccine, it's not too late to go get it. It's a pretty good match to what we're seeing this season. So it does protect you. And if you haven't received your bivalent booster for COVID, also go get that. It looks like we might be moving towards a yearly vaccine for COVID based on FDA recently had a meeting of their panel, the vaccination panel, and they're looking at that possibility. It seems like COVID and its variants may be entering a more predictable pattern, just like flu. So we haven't really had a new variant that is completely different than what we're seeing. So everything that we've been seeing, you know, even though we've heard there's these new subvariants, they're all part of the Omicron family. And so that is how we would expect the virus to continue mutating. We had seen, you know, previously we were seeing all of these different variants, like we had Delta and Alpha and all of those, and those were there were significant differences. And now what we're seeing is not quite that bad. So all in all, I think fairly good news, but continue to protect yourself. If you know folks that are immunocompromised, if you're visiting them, you know, please stay away if you're not feeling well, or make sure you're wearing a mask. You know, we're still seeing transmission of things, and masks do help protect from that. So just, you know, stay healthy, protect yourself, protect everybody, your community, and hopefully we are, you know, the days are getting longer, the sun will come out, and we'll have maybe not have to be as worried about some of these things as we move into the spring. But just, you know, keeping vigilant, and we'll continue to look at stuff. But at this point, we are everything is on a downward trajectory, which is good. Any questions?
I have one.
Go ahead, Diana.
What about these test sites are closing? So, you know, people are still going to need to have some kind of way to get a test kit or something.
Yep.
Is anything being done about that you know? Because I know
So-
over in Hawthorne, we're going to start doing this, you know, twice a month for people that need test kits and masks, because some insurances don't pay for that.
Yeah. So some, you know, for some people, insurance will cover up to 8 tests per month, so you can get those. We are not, you know, we're trying to look at what to do, as the state has announced the closing of the test sites, and the federal government is announcing the end of the public health emergency as of May 11th. So we don't have a plan as of yet, but we're looking at what, you know, like what we can do as a city. We just before, you know, just over December and January, one of the things we did was send out, you know, allow for people to request tests from us, and also distributed a lot of test kits to the public health, Minneapolis public housing high rises, where there's a lot of really, you know, vulnerable individuals, so that there would be some masks and gloves and test kits available. I think that is one of the things that we will be looking at, is in terms of vaccination and testing, how will people be able to access that if the test sites are closing. And you know, it's just the big ones. There are still some places, but with the end of the health emergency, that's going to bring another layer in terms of reimbursement, because some of these things won't be free. So that's definitely something that we will be looking into and trying to figure out how we as a city health department can support that, and how we can work with our colleagues at Hennepin County and at the state health department to also, you know, to make sure that people that need access have access to those kinds of things. And it may be that it'll be a community, you know, government community collaborations on some of these things, ensuring that community organizations have the information and the resources, so that, you know, so that we can work together to make it accessible to individuals. But that's a great question, because things are changing from a perspective of how things will be reimbursed for and paid for as well.
Okay, great. I want to throw a special shout out to North Point Health and Wellness. I and my family get our COVID shots or vaccinations at North Point, and I can't tell you how much how grateful I am that such a phenomenal resource is in our community, does such great work, and continues to be available. And I'm excited that they continue to expand and grow, increasing the capability of providing service to our community on this front and other fronts as well. So I hope people will pay attention and continue to support and grow and utilize, benefit from the excellent service and people at North Point. And you know, what's beautiful, Luisa, is that the silver lining in this experience is that it's brought a lot of different organizations and agencies out of their silos together to cooperate and to do collaboration, because it was necessary that we step across, you know, our comfort zones for the greater good, and that has happened. And I think the department, Luisa, you guys have been phenomenal, and North Point has been phenomenal. And, you know, organizations like Hawthorne and others have stepped up to the challenge to ensure and support efforts to get information and get action on the part of our residents to promote personal safety and therefore community safety. Any other comments or feedback on that?
I just want to say that you're absolutely right, Alan. I think that we're, that is, not that we didn't know that, but it was one of the biggest lessons of COVID is that we have to all work together and we can't continue to work in silos. I think even at the national level, CDC has realized that and is trying to change some things to ensure that there's if we find ourselves in this situation again, that there's a better way to respond where we're not caught in with things being so divided that we're not able to work across purposes. So, but definitely that community collaborations are the most important because that's the level at which people receive their services. So.
And I bring that up because my expectation and what I'll be saying and writing in Insight News is that that we've demonstrated the capacity and the value of collaboration. We need to make sure that we don't slide back into business as usual. And business as usual was sort of a complacency around these massive disparities all across the board that we sort of have been conditioned to believe that they are inevitable, intractable, unsolvable. And we know that that is not true. I think the thing we have to thank both COVID for and thank the George Floyd incident for is that people can and will and do respond. And so that now that a certain effectiveness has been demonstrated, we simply cannot allow ourselves to slide back into the old paradigm. And the old paradigm is a reflection or a maintenance of permanent, marginalization. Not acceptable anymore. Listen, let's keep going. Thank you so much. And anybody else want to jump in, please feel free. I see some smiles and some nods. And if you got a comment or a thought or a warning, this is a good time for it. Okay, then, well, let's move on. We've got a great program today. Let's go next to Brother Bill Magnuson, who brings us the public safety report from the 4th Precinct. Bill, good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you doing?
I'm well.
Good to hear. Morning, everyone. So I'll start off with Part 1 crimes for the Hawthorne neighborhood for January. And I'll remind everybody that a Part 1 crime is anytime we have a victim involved in this. So it's our more serious natured crimes. So for January for Hawthorne for homicides, we had one rape, 1 robbery, 9 assaults, 4 burglaries, 7 thefts, 10 auto thefts, 0 arsons for a total of 33. So that is a kind of a downward trend towards what we've had previously in the couple of months of December, November, which is good. We still like to see it go down. Unfortunately, we had a homicide and nobody likes to see that, and the 9 assaults, which, it's better than what we've had before in the past, but it's still people that are, acting violently. So, but over in that's what we had. We had 33. That's a pretty good number. And hopefully it continues to go down on the downtrend. And I don't know if anybody's recently saw the news release that came out, I think, end of last week, earlier this week, about the numbers from the Operation Endeavor that we've undertaken since September. And there's been a substantial decrease in all these crimes as well that I talked about citywide, not just in the north side or Hawthorne. So that's good news too. And that's going to continue. They're going to continue with that Operation Endeavor. So hopefully we'll start seeing those similar numbers going down more. So does anybody have any questions?
Let me start with the obvious question, Bill. Let's draw the distinction between Operation Endeavor and the philosophy and policies of Minneapolis Police Department and the Scorpion unit in Memphis, Tennessee, which has demonstrated and revealed the underbelly of incorrect policing. Talk about that if you would. What is Endeavor and how are we different from that kind of activity?
Well, I think that since Commissioner Alexander came in, he was brought in for a reason, and that was to do law enforcement professionally and justly and respectively. And that's what that's been the message and the mantra from day one. And I think I can't speak to other precincts, but I know for a fact in the 4th precinct that that's been the message that Inspector Adams has conveyed to everyone too. And with up here and on the 4th precinct especially, we are working towards, and since Inspector Adams started, and even before that, but Inspector Adams especially, we work towards building relationships and partnerships within our own communities to help, because we cannot do this alone. We need the community support. We need the community to work with us and together. And I think it's proven very effectively up here on the in the 4th precinct, especially since, for instance, to give an examples, like everybody remembers what it was like in 2020 and 2021 on Broadway in Lindale. And Inspector Adams, myself, and other members of the 4th precinct and the community worked together with CPED, Eric Hanson's group, Community Planning, Economic Development, Business Licensing, to kind of correct the things that were taking place in the Merwin's parking lot, working with the Sanctuary Covenant Church, listening to the community, and then eventually having Trey Pollard's group, We Push for Peace, kind of take management over there. And they did a tremendous job of relocating some of those bad actors over there. And then we just got to get on top of that, where they've relocated to and continue to, you know, make arrests if necessary, and try to get the addicts and those other ones that are suffering from addiction and mental health issues, try to get them the help they needed. So I think that's the difference that we have. And I don't know much about the Scorpion unit, so I don't want to, you know, speak out of turn. Sure, but I know that whole thing started over reckless driving, which is a traffic ticket. That's a traffic ticket. So I think that we have to get back to this whole thing with community-oriented policing and working with the community and having the community work with us and trust and build trust and continue to develop and foster those relationships. So I think that's what's been taking place in Minneapolis since 2020. And I think that we're moving in the right direction. I hope we keep moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions or comments? Any feedback? Well, on behalf of everybody here, Bill, kudos and thank you personally, but thank your colleagues and leadership at the department and certainly at the precinct for being present, being transparent, and being effective in what I believe is the right way. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, you know, and let's see, well then, you know, Clarence is not here today, so we will not have a report from our Human partnership that Clarence brings every month. Then we'll just move straight ahead into Diana's and Ann's favorite part of the program among them, and that's honoring those who make us better. So I'm going to turn it over to Diana and Ann DeGroot.
So everyone, you know, this is my favorite part. And like I said, if you're able to, you know, turn on your cameras in honor of these two people that we're going to honor today in the high school, you know, out of respect, please do. Miss Ann, I'll have you go first. You can do, yeah, I'll have you go first.
All right, I will be happy to go first. I'm going to do a screen share here because I want to let you see who we are honoring. I think I got the right thing. There we go. So I have had the honor and the ability to work for years with Henry High School, and particularly with this gentleman who, when he was principal of Henry High School, Yusuf Abdallah, who worked with us and our outreach team. And we honored our outreach team here with the huddle a few months ago. But principals have a great deal of discretion around how they spend some of the dollars in the high school. And Yusuf decided that a good use of funds was to make sure to have a youth engagement outreach team in his school that could really help and ensure that the young people were engaged and that they had ways of working with adult youth work professionals to make their way through school safely. And so this fellow who I worked with, we had a few little conflicts, but it was all in service of our young people, and it was all good. Was a great guy to work with, and I loved working with you. I don't know if I've ever told you that, Yusuf, but you were a great guy to work with, and I always, and still do trust your dedication to our children and young people. And You have now been knocked upstairs to being an associate principal, but I want to just show this too. This is the logo of Henry, because Henry High School was the school in which you worked with our outreach team. And so just to honor your great work with our young people, your work with the outreach team, but just your tremendous contributions to the North Side as the principal of Henry High School, which you did, I don't know, was it 6 years? Am I losing count? 7 years, quite a while.
7 years.
7 years. You're a great principal at that school. And I know that the kids really, really felt safe. They felt comfortable. And I know that they did well while you were principal. So we want to honor you with this award from the Huddle. And I'm assuming there are other school people here. Some other people might want to speak as well. But I appreciate you, and I appreciate all the work that you did all of those years and the groundwork that you laid at Henry, and how welcoming and caring you were to our own team, which proved to be, interestingly, a little bit controversial in some quarters of the city.
Yeah.
But you understood them, and you got them, and you brought them in, and I think they make a difference in the school, but they would never have been there without you. So thank you so much for all of your work.
Thank you.
I would open to see if others want to.
I just want to add, I really appreciate the way that you have instilled some goodness in my son in all of those years while you were there. So now Rochelle has inherited the headache, but I really appreciate you, Yusuf.
I wasn't going to bring your son up.
No, I had to, because he would always come home and tell me about you and, things that you would tell him. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you said booted upstairs to associate principal. You meant associate superintendent.
I did. Yes. Thank you.
So caught that correction and put that out there, because that's a wonderful thing. Well, let's first, before we ask Brother Yusuf, Associate Superintendent Yusuf, to speak, see if there's anybody else that wants to add a voice, a thought, an impression, and a congratulation. Anybody else here have a comment about Brother Yusuf or about Henry and the district? Here's a minute.
Well, this is Rochelle. Sorry.
Oh, and Mary Yang has her hand up, I think.
As an alumni of Patrick Henry High School 2016, thank you for being a great principal during those times, and you really brought changes to Patrick Henry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. And Rochelle, go ahead.
Thank you. And I know I'm speaking later, but Diana, and I'm not sure how much Yusuf paid you for this award when I'm coming on, but in all seriousness, that's one of the things I love about Yusuf is the humor he brings to our team, but also the laser focus on our strategic plan. Yusuf has taught me so many things, and really is such a valued member of our cabinet. It's always hard to take someone who's doing so extremely well out of a school, right? And that was something I thought about a lot as we were moving forward, but being able to spread his knowledge, his love, his passion across the district has just been so helpful. Yusuf has a very large portfolio of schools that he works with. And, there's many a day I look at Yusuf, I'm like, you good? How you doing? Right? We check in and do that. But he's been an amazing colleague to work with. And I just appreciate the Hawthorne Huddle for honoring him in this way. It's really lovely to see and much appreciated from us here at Minneapolis Public Schools.
Thank you.
Well, do we want to hear from Yusuf right now? Diana and Yusuf, go ahead.
Diana, and thank you for acknowledging my work at Henry High School. I truly, it sounds cliche, but I truly believe it takes a village. I'm not one who feel like I can come to a situation and do it all by myself. There's a lot of people that have contributed to the work and the success of Henry High School. And YCB was just one of those groups that people were trying to figure out, should they be in school, should they not be in school? And I didn't look at YCB as an organization. I more so looked at the YCB as the people. Got to know Byron Hawkins and his staff and LaToya. They're passionate young people who wanted to the same things that I wanted for the students. So, you know, they thought they were a group that was just going to be breaking up fights. Instead, I saw a group of people of color who can relate, who can connect, who can de-escalate, who can problem solve. So it definitely took a village. Those of you who know, I mean, I've been challenged with trying to lead a building through a pandemic, trying to lead a building through the murder and assassination of George Floyd, trying to lead a building with all the violence that has taken place and have taken our students. So none of those situations have been easy to lead through, but I believe my leadership style, my relationship building, and my sense of community allowed that work just to happen naturally with just a laser focus on, as Rochelle Cox said, a strategic plan. Who are we, where we want to go, how are we going to get there? And then once we get there, how are we going to sustain? I mean, these are all things that as a youngster was instilled in me as a, you know, from my mom and my dad, and something that I want to just make sure that I pour into any environment, any situation that I'm connected to. It's easy to lead a school, though, to be, in all honesty, when your kid's there, right? So I had the luxury to start at Nellie Stone Johnson. My sons, my daughter was there. So, you know, parents would come in and say, you know, what are you doing for this school? I'm doing for this school just as much as I'm doing for my own kids, right? So, you know, I care about this community. I care about the school. So I'm going to do all I can to see that your child, my child, get what they deserve. I'm blessed to have my wife by my side who works in Minneapolis Public Schools, who is unapologetically, you know, representing the Black community in North Minneapolis. She's from North Minneapolis. She's a product of Minneapolis Public Schools, graduate of North High School. So when I talk about community, those are all aspects of who I am and what I'm about and what I'm going to continue to lead on.
I think that deserves a round of applause. So
I think you speak best for yourself for why you're getting this award. That was beautiful, Yusuf. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
I've really loved working with you, and I'm so glad to see you here today. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Okay. I know Bill has to jump off because it's time to take that baby to school. So we're going to move on to our next honoree so we can give the superintendent her time due. Miss Robin, should I say Dr. Robin Austin. When I first met her, I thought this lady thought I was crazy because she said all I did was smile and was about community. And she got me involved in something pertaining to health, real deep. And we created an application out of that that's really, really gone somewhere. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate Dr. Robin and her counterpart, Dr. Karen, but she's retired now. But I feel that she came into North Minneapolis, brought something to the community, and I'm gonna let her tell you the rest. So, and you're gonna put Dr. Robin's plaque up for us, and I'm gonna let her give you her own spiel on while we are going to honor her, because I've never seen a person take the time and come into the community and do what she did. So thank you, Dr. Robin, and I'm going to let you have your fair due.
Thank you so much. It's a huge honor and a huge privilege. When I got your email, I was like, I was so excited. I was so honored and so touched. And it's hard to believe. I was thinking back of when we started this work, I think too, with Clarence and Human, I think it was in 2017, 2018. Yeah. So pre-pandemic, and how we really kind of continue to evolve and what we learned along the way and how we then re-implemented what we learned back into the community. And I just was so appreciative of having the opportunity to come in and share what we would like, our kind of our vision for what we wanted to do. So not only talk about health and some challenges that we all have with health, but what are some of those positive aspects or the strengths component. And I think that really was kind of my driving force, that we all have great things. And so how do we use that and leverage that to maybe offset some health challenges? And we really focused on a lot around the opioids issue, which is still prevalent and still a huge undertaking. And so I think the more we can continue to keep that lens and that focus, but also really honoring that strengths component and all of the wonderful things that people have to continue to grow off of. And so I think just being able to see how this work has evolved over time, and the ability to work with you and Hawthorne and Human and Al McFarlane, we've been on your show as well. So just so thankful that we have the opportunity to, I think, have a platform to hear from community, but then give the data back. And data sounds like a big word, but it really was, what are people asking for? And to be able to provide that back as a source of conversation and dialogue on where do we go. And so for me, that's just been so rewarding. And I really like to continue, we'll continue this work as long as we can. And so thank you again. I really just am so honored. And I speak for myself, and the School of Nursing as well is really one of our missions, is working with community and really, I think, taking that voice of community and moving forward. And how do we, again, leverage, I think, all of the wonderful things. So any questions I'd be happy to take, but again, so honored. And thank you again for having me here and all of the work that we continue to do. So thank you all.
Thank you. And was the principal of Henry on, or she's muted?
No, she didn't make it, and I'm assuming something must have come up at the school.
Well, that's okay. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. L now. We're right on time.
Okay, great. Well, thank you and congratulations to our honorees, both deserving and both giving us, a sense of pride in our community and each other. Thank you for your amazing work. Well, excuse me, today it's our honor to present the interim superintendent of the Minneapolis Public Schools. You heard her already, but I'll say a little bit about her in her introduction. And interim superintendent Rochelle Cox has more than 25 years of experience as an educator with the Minneapolis Public Schools. She served students who received special education services and their families for much of that time. And now in her role as interim superintendent, she's focused on listening, on learning, and identifying ways to help the community come together, an effort to boost the academic achievement for all students. Well, we welcome here to the Hawthorne Huddle. And Rochelle, the microphone is yours.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here with all of you today. Thanks for the invitation. It's always a great day when I get to share about what's happening in Minneapolis Public Schools, and this is an amazing group to be with. So thank you for letting me be a part of this. I want to first talk a little bit like what's going on, what's happening in Minneapolis Public Schools. As you know, one of my first priorities is always about academics, academic rigor, educating our youth. We have been focusing on both reading and math. So getting back to the basics, this year we started a new math curriculum, K through 5. And as I've been out in schools and seeing it, our teachers love it. The students love it, super engaging, and I will say it's a lot of work. So a heavy lift for our teachers. And what I'm hearing about the new curriculum is that year one is really tough, and then it gets easier as manipulatives are built and routines are established. So we're really excited to see how this new math curriculum takes off. We've had a reading curriculum now at our K-5 for about 7 years. This will be year 7. So it really is time for us to relook and see how it's going. So we're doing an audit of that curriculum. The vendor that we use is doing a refresh, and we're hearing that it's looking very different from the one we currently use. So as we enter budget season, I'm thinking about what that reading curriculum is going to look like. We've also been really heavily focused on intervention. So how can we, for students who are falling behind, how can we provide intensive interventions for them? And so we now, after 2 years of implementation, have in every one of our elementary schools an intervention called PRESS, and it really helps in a small group setting. Students catch up on skills that they may need as we move forward. We also are working with the University of Minnesota to do some extra training for our teachers as we look at the science of reading and phonics and instilling that. And so going back to that also, if those of you that follow reading, there's been a pendulum swing of whole language versus phonics. And so, you know, I'm hoping that pendulum lands somewhere in the middle. That's really good for kids. But taking that big approach of looking at that. Now, those are real long-term things. We have a lot of work to do 6-12 in reading. This year under Yusuf's leadership, we've added reading interventionists at our middle schools. I think the concept is great. There's some scheduling issues with that, as we know our middle schoolers have a lot on their plates and a lot that they want to do. So, you know, we continue to rework that, looking at what are some strong interventions for middle school. And I think an area that, as in the future, that you'll be hearing more about is what intervention looks like at our high school. Eventually, my goal for Minneapolis Public Schools, and we're not going to have to worry about that, because all of our students, as they leave third grade, are going to have a very strong reading foundation. But right now, that's not the case. So while we're focused on K-5, I also want to focus on middle school and high school to make sure those students who need that intervention are getting it. So you'll be hearing more about that also. Now, those are real long-term strategies, right? We talk about curriculum interventions. But this year, I've also asked the board to support me in providing what we're calling some academic boosts. Because if I had a child, my children are much older, but if I had a child in middle or high school, I want to know, what are you doing now for my student, right? So we did a lot of research, and very interesting. One of the really outstanding research that is showing has a lot of promise in practice is online tutoring. And you're like, oh my gosh, kids have just been online. We don't want to do that anymore. It looks a little different. So online reading tutoring, it's done by licensed staff. It is done during the school day. So we're not putting the burden on our families to have to, you know, tell their student, like, hey, we're going to get on the computer and do more work tonight. And it is progress monitored, so we can watch and see how the kids are doing. So we've allowed our principals to opt in on that. Our principals are instructional leaders of our schools. They know what's best for their kids. We use data to determine who has access to this online tutoring. There are no kindergartners who aren't, because we know that's not the way our kindergartners learn. There are no students who are new to Minneapolis or are new to the country. So as we know, those students learn best. And then also, when we look at our students receiving special education services, we are allowing our students who receive speech services to be a part of this, but we also know our students receiving special education services get a much higher level of intervention from their special education staff. So the other academic boost we decided to put into place this year was ACT tutoring. So I am privileged to have a board of citywide students, my leadership team, and their number one piece that they talk to me about all the time is, we need help with ACT. So we put in a tutoring program that kids can access 24/7. Teachers can access it as part of their school, and also there'll be some in-person tutoring at different sites. So I think that's going to be another place where we can really help our students. So as you see, my leadership style is, you got to have a long-term plan, but we also got to keep things moving and get some things going for our kids. So you know, it's really nice to hear Bill and talking about safety. You know, safety has been one of those things that, number one, they don't teach you in superintendent school, and two, I never thought that I would be spending so much of my time, my thought, my angst over safety for our students. I asked the board to approve, and they did back in fall, a safety plan proposal that put an $1.4 million into safety for Minneapolis Public Schools for the next 2 years. I wanted it to be stable as we go through another transition with a superintendent. Though that safety plan put in place security vehicles that do a loop here on the north side, one down on Chicago. That's they're not getting out of their car and tackling anybody. I'll be honest about that, but they are eyes and ears about hearing what's going on. So they're circling around in our school parking lots, around the perimeters of schools, being the eyes and the ears, and they're connected to our school offices as well as our central office as they see concerns. We also provided 4 of our high schools money to partner with community organizations to help with safety and to build community in our schools. And that partnership with our community, it's just so valuable. And you all know that being on that. So that was a big part of it. We also are putting 6 security monitors in middle and elementary schools, and those move around. So when we see hotspots, we're able to kind of move those positions around. They're really to look at the outside of our schools, right? So what's happening on the playground? Someone who's looking at the playground in the morning after what might have been a lot of activity on that playground that evening. They're walking the perimeter. They're making sure that students have a safe environment to be outside and enjoy their school outside places, as well as monitoring some of the security cameras we have in our schools around the outside. And then finally, we really looked at athletic events. And so we upped the number of people who are providing safety at our athletic events, and then also know we needed to compensate them better. So those are those 4 things. So safety is another thing that's always on our mind. Enrollment's really huge. And I think when you look at enrollment, you hear about our fiscal concerns in Minneapolis Public Schools. I never want us to take our eyes off getting people back into Minneapolis Public Schools. We have a whole department called We Want You Back. And that is the truth. But one of the things we're doing with enrollment that's been kind of unique is we've taken 3 schools and we've been calling them our focus schools and really trying out some unique strategies to see if we can build enrollment. Those schools are Franklin and Hall and Bethune. And I will tell you that they were severely under-enrolled as we started the school year. With our efforts, there's now, I believe, last I heard, 17 seats open across all 3. So we've made tremendous gains there. As you know, if you've driven around, you've seen been by Hall. We have a new observatory. We had an astronaut come and actually open that. Our students had, and I got to wear a lab coat. I felt like a scientist. It was amazing being at Hall and our STEM Academy there. Bethune, we're opening a new performing arts center. We're excited. I believe in March or April, we'll be having a big kickoff and kickoff events through the summer for that. And then Franklin Middle School. I mean, Franklin really doesn't need a lot. They are doing tremendous things. I mean, what a talented group of kids we have. But we're also helping them think about things like marketing, how they're doing their open houses differently. So that's really exciting. We'll be taking that lessons learned and expanding that for next year as we look at just increasing enrollment across Minneapolis Public Schools. And I will say, I think the number one way to increase enrollment in Minneapolis Public Schools is to build trust. Right? And it's showing up here, it's showing up at community events. And I think that's one of the things that we all are looking to you to help us know where we need to show up. You know, how we get those invitations to come and talk about the great things happening, as well as being really realistic about our challenges. As you know, staffing is a challenge for us. I just, this week, I can't remember what day it was, I think it was Tuesday, I was at the Capitol testifying about a bill to fully fund special education. I shared with our legislatures there that we still have 57 openings for special education teachers in Minneapolis Public Schools, as well as 107 special education assistants. So as we go through and look at that, that causes tremendous stress on our system, because the teachers and the SEAs who show up every day in their brilliant ways have to do double duty now, right? Because we don't have the staff that we typically have. So staffing is also another key area. And as we look at that staffing, our students, our families, our staff are telling us that we need to recruit and retrain our staff of colors. And that is a way to welcome them into Minneapolis Public Schools, but also to disrupt the barriers, the microaggressions, the systematic racism that they face every day in our system. And that's work that we need to dig in. We need to dig in hard about that. Our equity team is currently working on, we're struggling with the name, equity competencies. To me, I'm never going to be competent in equity. That's a journey I'm going to be on for the rest of my life. But equity capacity builders, right? What does that look like, and what do we believe as a system? And how does that inform how we relate to each other, and also how we provide professional development to our colleagues? And then I would say, lastly, I'm really excited about February, y'all. It's Black History Month, and we have so much to celebrate, and we're never are going to be able, and we never should, pack it all into just one month. But we're going to do our best here at Minneapolis Public Schools. So we got a lot. I just wanted to say, I wanted to invite you all. We have a exhibit here at the Davis Center, an art exhibit that's featuring African-American artwork that celebrates identity, love, traditions, and joy and storytelling. We're going to have an opening reception next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. So come over and join me. I'd love to see you all there. So I'm watching my time very closely, and I think I'm done, even though I could talk for another 6 hours, as Yusuf knows. But just again, I just want to say thank you so much for the invitation. This is where we need to show up, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I think that I'm speaking on behalf of all the people in the room. We could listen to you for another 6 hours as well. What you've said and what you're saying is so important, so clear, and I think so appreciated. I have a gazillion questions, which I will not ask because I think I want to be fair to the rest of the people here. But let me just do a distilled assessment. We've come through a year where teachers were questioning how their value should be appreciated. So in a minute or two, give an assessment on teacher satisfaction, how teachers see themselves and their role in the district being elevated, supported. That's number one. And tie that, if you would, Superintendent, to your vision and statement, your narrative about the mission of the district itself for families and children. The customer is the child and her or his family, and therefore community. So put that together for me, if you would, in a brief statement.
Yeah, Mr. McFarlane, you're absolutely right. Trust was so broken. And I actually was a person who was on the negotiation team for the management side, as well as I've been on negotiation teams for the last 3 negotiation periods. It was challenging, and it really goes to the space of how important relationships are, how important it is to appreciate. And that appreciation shows up in many ways, right? It shows up in how you're compensated for the work that you do. It shows up in how you're appreciated. And it also shows up at how you're respected for your craft. And I always say teaching is both a science and an art, right? There's a science to it, but there is an art to it that is when you see it in a classroom, it's like, it just like gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. So we need to show up as a district for our teachers in both that fiscal compensation. And we'll be starting actually negotiations probably here in the next month or two. Seems like we just finished, but we'll be starting again. President Callahan and I have been talking about how do we heal from last time? Like, we can't just like start up again and be like, okay, here we go again, right? So we're talking about how do we set norms? How do we heal? How do we have those healing spaces for people who were in the last negotiations round and will be continuing into the next one, as well as how do we figure out how to work together better, right? Because we're going to have differences. That's the whole piece about negotiations. So I'm really actually looking forward to it. I want to lift our teachers up to hear what they have to say. I think what the exciting thing is that the strategic plan is the piece that unites us, right? So that's the important piece. So if we can all get around those 4 goals of building and district climate, we think about academic achievement for our students, we think about effective staff, and we think about student well-being. Those pieces are really important, and those are what are going to tie us together to get through and to do amazing things for our students. And I will tell you, I'm concerned about the emotional wellness of our teachers, right? And that's something I think we as a senior leadership team have really been talking about. When you look at the tragedies that have happened at Henry High School, I was just having a conversation the other day with the associate superintendent about what else can we do for those teachers, right? Burnout is real. There's many joyful moments as a teacher in a day, but the heaviness of the work as you end your day can often override some of that joy that the magic of teaching brings. So sorry, that was a long answer to that piece, but I think it's trust, I think it's respect, and I think it's affirmation.
One more short question. You mentioned that you described teaching or the work of the organization. The institution is both a science and an art. I would submit that it's also a business. So what about the business of education? What is the revenue stream associated with this work? I think you've got probably $1 billion enterprise. I'm not sure what the numbers are, but it's somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion, or even more than that. Speak to that. And how does having responsibility for that much money afford the district the opportunity to be a change agent around the economy of the community and of the city? I applaud the district for moving and building the Davis Center. That's a massive investment. And I think that kind of intentionality can serve and elevate the development power of institution maintenance and building. 1 minute, if you would. That's a 20-minute question that you can respond to in about a minute and a half.
Yeah, so fiscal stewardship is so important. And here at the Davis Center, we think of ourselves as visitors to the neighborhood, and we want to be good neighbors. So that's important to me as we look. Yeah, I think sometimes, your family goes, wow, they let you have that much money, right? Like, it's a lot of money, and yet it feels like it's never enough, right? Because there's always new initiatives, new things to do. As we look at it, I think you'll hear us and the board talking as we move forward about what does that fiscal stewardship look like? Do we have the right amount of buildings and infrastructure? Is it right-sized with the amount of students that we have? And that's that whole about what is our current reality and what are we always looking to increase enrollment. So that's a constant tension as we move. I think the legislative work, working at the Capitol, is really important as we look at big bills this year, and with the surplus of looking at, tying our general formula to inflation, looking at increases of, hopefully more than 1% to 2%. And then I think the other big two are, fully funding of special education EL. Right now we have a $60 million cross subsidy in special education. And that's what we have to take out general fund, because what we get doesn't match from the federal and state government. So, and 30 million of that is from tuition billing of students that open enroll outside and are billed back into Minneapolis public schools. So I think it's staying on top of that piece is really important too. We are going through this year at the Davis Center for the first time. We're doing in a long time, and I used to do a lot of department budgets. In my other roles in Minneapolis public schools, we're doing priority-based budgeting. And so instead of saying, you need to take 5% deficit, take 10% of your bill. We're actually asking people, what do you need to do your job? And so as we do that and people talk about things that are essential to the work of Minneapolis Public Schools, that are statutory regulated that we have to do, as well as what is linked to our strategic plan, we'll be laying that all out for the board as they look towards May to vote on budgets in June.
Thank you. Any questions? I see Sean put a note in the chat saying, can we get an update on activities of North Community High School?
Always love to give an update on North Community High School. So lots of construction going on at North Community High School. We're doing some renovations actually in the high school. And then in September, we broke ground as part of the comprehensive district design. We broke ground on a new career and technical education center that will be attached to North High School. It will be a separate program, because when we look at career and tech ed money, that has to be able to get those federal fundings. It has to be open and available to any student in the district. So we want to make sure that our North High students are prioritized. They're not going to have to get on a bus to get to the programming, but they're going to actually be able to walk right through a door to get there. Other students across the district will have access to what's happening in our CTE center, but they will have to be bused, and we'll be providing one-way transportation to them to the center. We'll have 13 pathways. CTE Center by North High School will be one. There'll also be pathways at Edison as well as Roosevelt. So there'll be automotive down at Roosevelt, urban agriculture in Edison. We know the one that it will be next to North High School will focus on a lot of computer, IT, cybersecurity, healthcare. So we're just really excited about the partnership and hope again that the community sees it as another investment into our community.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Great presentation. Hopefully, Diana, we can invite the district back again and again and again. I think we can never be tired of exploring the possibilities. And again, applause for your great work. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate coming and happy to be here anytime.
Okay.
But if Yusuf gets another award next time I'm here, I'm going to start to think about things. No, I'm sorry. I have to tease him. Thank you again for honoring him and his work. I really appreciate it.
Real quick, Al, can I ask a question to
Go ahead.
So right now, first of all, I'm Ann Johnson, just week 2 back to Minneapolis, originally from North Minneapolis native. Used to work for the district as well, started my career in Minneapolis Public Schools. So my question is centered around the buzz in the community about the community school actually closing. And so if you could speak to that. And then secondly, it's great that we have put a lot into Bethune and Franklin and building up the populations in those schools, but what about some of the other schools? And I'm thinking mostly about, we have a partnership with Ellie Stone Johnson, and they are they're low. And so just a question is if you have anything to tell us about that and how we can build up the attendance at that school as well.
Yeah, so let me take the last one first because I'll remember it. And good to see you, Ms. Johnson. Good to see you. Glad you're back. I think that the lessons learned as we pick these 3 schools to start with are going to overflow. And we are working with all of our schools. It's important to, look at enrollment at all those schools. We have an amazing principal at Nellie Stone Johnson, amazing community partnerships there. So lessons learned from these 3 schools will overflow as we move and we pick more priority schools as we're moving forward. Yeah, thanks for letting me. I've heard too that there's this idea like, hey, we're closing schools and it's going to be North, and I want to be really honest. I think if you watch our board meetings, you'll hear some of our board members talking about we're going to have to close schools. Others talk about transforming schools. There's lots of ways you can talk about it, but I think that conversation it will continue to come and over the next couple of years as you look at our financial situations. I will tell you, and I hope that you, as friends of the Minneapolis Public Schools, say this when you're hearing in the space. There is no list of schools that are like, here's the ones we think we're closing. Like, I hear that all the time, like, where's the list? There is no list, you know, and in my piece, we have first as a community need to talk about what we want in schools before we even start to talk about closing a school, right? We need to have consensus about what a good school for Minneapolis Public Schools look like. I feel like the renovations that we're putting into North, as well as anchoring a CTE center next to it, next to what we feel is a very strong high school, and the legacy of the Polars, I don't see us going down in that direction. And like I said, there's no list, but I'm just saying those three things are things that I would feel very confident as a community that Minneapolis Public Schools is investing in the school. They're investing in the students, and we're also bringing more resources to the campus. So thank you for letting me say that, Ms. Johnson. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Ann Johnson, and thank you, Superintendent Cox, for that response as well. Well, we could stay here for a long time, but we cannot stay here. We've got another program or more program to move into, and I want to take this moment to pivot and introduce our next guest. Tonya Allen is the president of the McKnight Foundation. She's a leader and a change agent with a passion for co-creating an equitable, sustainable world. She became the president of McKnight Foundation in 2021. As you know, McKnight is a family-based foundation that advances the idea of a more just, creative, and abundant future where people and the planet thrive. And so her team, interestingly, is composed mostly of women, and the majority of them in senior leadership are people of color. She's got a group of around 60 people, and that's a unique situation. The foundation, McKnight Foundation, grants about $120 million annually in support of equitable communities, in support of a clean energy economy, in support of global food systems, supporting artists and culture bearers, and supporting innovation in neuroscience research. In her first year at McKnight, she championed using the foundation's investments to advance what's called net zero goals. And she elevated the voice and leadership of our community to help rebuild Twin Cities neighborhoods and small businesses that were impacted by COVID-19 and the 2020 civil unrest. Well, I could go on and on, but she's here. Let's let her speak. One of the things that motivated the invitation was a call from the guru, Sean, saying, you know what, Tonya's doing this phenomenal podcast, and we gotta get her to the huddle. And here she is. Sean, as always, thank you for being the eyes and ears of the community. You are watching everything all the time, and all of us benefit from the attention you pay to the details of life in our community and in the world. So thank you for the suggestion. And Tonya Allen, thank you for being responsive and willing to be here. Let me turn the microphone over to you, and you can take it where you want to.
Oh, well, first, thanks so much, Al. It's good to see you again. And Sean is my eyes and ears too. So as a new person to the Twin Cities, he keeps me abreast of a lot of different things that I just don't have exposure to because I don't have proximity to it. So thank you, Sean, for that. And so it's just good to be with everyone. So it's interesting. I was just thinking, I was like, boy, how the world has changed where we can have community meetings on Zoom. That's such a lovely thing. I started my career in Detroit off as a community organizer working in neighborhoods. But even before I started my career doing that, I actually followed my grandmother around, who was a neighborhood organizer. And she worked, I just remember her organizing block meetings. I remember her making us make us clean up the alleyways so that we could have some place to play. And I also remember saying, why won't somebody go over there and clean up that field, Grandma? It just looks terrible. And she said, you know what? You are somebody. And so my cousins and I walked across the street. It took us 3 days to clean that field up, but that was, so that's my kind of legacy and history. And when I was at the Skillman Foundation in Detroit, which is also, it's a private foundation, not a family foundation, but it came from 3M money, just like McKnight. I spent about 10 years working deeply in partnership with communities. And we ended up spending about $120 million over that 10 years in those neighborhoods. But what was most impressive was that we ended up probably raising about or matching about another $200 or $300 million that went into those places as a result of the resources and the attention that we tried to bring to those communities. And to really lift up community voice and lift up community capacity to serve children in their neighborhoods was the body of that work. And so it was so great to hear you, Superintendent Cox, because I also spent a lot of time on schools and was a part of leading a coalition in Detroit that actually prevented Detroit Public Schools from going into bankruptcy and rewriting the financial situation, which actually has allowed it to start to rewrite the academic situation. So I have a long history of kind of being a civic leader, meaning I kind of define it as, or somebody called me a civic diplomat. I didn't really know what that meant, but what I think it means is like, I'm not afraid to work with people that I don't know, that may think about issues that are different from me. That come from different sectors, who have different ideas about how you get to a solution, all in the pursuit of values-based solutioning. So that's what I'm hoping to bring to the McKnight Foundation. And we had a lot of work to do. Many of you know the McKnight Foundation, and we have, for some people, we felt like a fortress. So there's a lot of work that we needed to do to continue to make ourselves more accessible, to make ourselves more proximate inside of community, and to really understand like how we can make contributions to community that's outside of just our grant dollars. As an institution, we have lots of different forms of capital, and it's important that we also bring those pieces of capital in alignment with our mission and our vision. I will talk about two quick things and then I'll just stop talking so we can get into discussion. McKnight is it's a place-based foundation, and my ambition is that we work in real places with real people, and that's the work we've been doing. But what we're trying to, and we've done it in Minnesota, we're now doing it across the Midwestern states, and we're also doing it in a multinational sense across the global South. So part of what I'm trying to get us to do is have consistency and reliability. And I think one of the things the superintendent talked about a bit was trust. And I have this very simple trust formula, right? It's proximity plus reliability plus competency over your self-interest, like the perception of your self-interest. And so we think about that all the time, like how do we show up in a way where we're proximate enough to people that they can trust us, where we have intimacy, How do we show up in a reliable way that you can reliably expect this is what you're going to get out of the McKnight Foundation? This is how we're going to respond, whatever, even if you don't like the way we're going to respond, but you'll know that it's reliable. And then finally, we got to be at the top of our game. Like the issues that we're trying to tackle as an institution, the issues that you are trying to tackle in your community require us to bring excellence to this work. And that doesn't mean perfection, but we have to bring as much competency as we possibly can. So if you look at our website, you see our staff. We're going after the best and the brightest talent that we can, that want to come work for us. But let me just say that. And then, and you'll see that it's diverse. I think someone told me that it was at one point McKnight used to be called McWhite. And so if you look at our team, we are no longer McWhite at McKnight Foundation. And then the final thing I wanted to just share with you is that we've been getting a lot of attention about a coalition that we've been running called Groundbreak. And I wanted to just share a little bit about the Groundbreak Coalition because I think it's really important. When I came to town, one of the first things I did is I went to some of the partners who were working in community, and I said to them, you know, I really think that McKnight has a role to play in the rebuild and the recovery post the uprisings. And what I was told was this, you know, we're going to repair, we're going to rebuild, and we need to reimagine. Now we got the repair and the rebuild part. Why don't you go off and reimagine? I do that. I don't know if they were being condescending, but I felt a bit of condescending. But, you know, for me, it was no problem because I was like, oh, this is great. Let us invest with community to talk about what the future looks like. That felt beautiful to me until I got information back from community, which basically said, here's our plan. We want to own this. We want it to represent our culture. We wanted to create community. Nothing that surprised me. And then they didn't surprise me again. They said, and we need money to do it. But the insight I got at that moment was like, oh, this is a setup. We're asking people what they want. They're going to tell us what they need, and we're not going to give it to them. So Groundbreak really came out of this ambition to say, like, we need a lot of capital. And as a philanthropic organization, even though you hear the $120 million number, that's not going to solve the problem. Charity is not going to rewrite these systems. Quite honestly, when we first started with Groundbreak, we were thinking that it was going to be a $2 billion number over a 10-year period. And what we're finding is that it's actually closer to about $6 billion that we believe will help rewrite communities and start to build Black wealth. And so we went to work on this coalition of people, a lot of people who are capital deployers, like financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, foundation, government. So it feels a little top heavy, but I want to be really clear about why it's top heavy. It's because we need these people to rethink the way that they use their capital. And we got to create some space for them to be able to be vulnerable to do that. And sometimes it's just hard to do it when you got, I don't even have to say that. So anyway, so we try to do that. We brought some community members into this, philanthropic organizations, government entities, and we didn't say we were going to try and solve all problems to all people. What we try to say is, like, how do we solve this capital challenge? How do we do a systemic analysis of what that means, what it looks like? And then let's see if we can do that. Then what happens is we fuel the good work that's happening in community, right? And it also means it'll have to tilt some projects that we do in community, which are workarounds, right? Like, so we have a ton of workarounds, like the capital systems don't work for us, so we're going to work around them. Like, we're going to figure out how to raise philanthropic capital to do this, when in actuality, like, market capital needs to work. And I don't want to say that, and I want to be clear, capital is not the solution to everything. It's just a piece of the puzzle. But we think if we can crack that piece, that actually other pieces will begin to flow and move in a way that actually changes and moves a needle. So Groundbreak is focused on 4 things: affordable housing, it's focused on home ownership, it's focused on investing, doing commercial development in the cultural corridors. And then finally, helping Black businesses or helping just businesses in general. Now, when I keep saying back and forth between Black and then I'll say for all communities of color, is because I think one of the things that this coalition did that I believe is unique to the Twin Cities was that this coalition decided to take a targeted universalism approach. And you all may know what this is. It's basically like, look, we're going to go after the hardest issue. And if we go after that hardest issue, the solutions that we develop in doing that actually will work for that targeted population, but it also will be a way to enable and open up solutions for other groups. Because if you can serve the hardest, then it means you get to serve everyone else. So they made a decision to say, like, we're not going after the whole BIPOC population. We want to serve them. But in order for us to do this, we have to first serve Black families in this region. And honestly, this region owes Black families something. And so I'm really proud that a group of financial institutions and capital deployers, after we wrestle with that, like hard issues, like if you're going to lead, if you're going to be in position of leadership, then you got to wrestle with hard stuff and you got to come out on the right side of that, not the safe side of that. And so that's part of what we attempted to do through that work. And so we're at this space where we have talked with Black entrepreneurs, we've talked to people, Black families who want to purchase homes, and we understand what those challenges are for many of them, and we're trying to solve for that, which means there are different ways that we can do that. Like one, we need banks to behave differently, and we need new regulatory rules for those banks, and so we're looking to try and figure out how we do that and target it here. We need to have patient and low cost capital for like people who want to do development deals and they can't stack that capital fast enough before the deal falls apart. I often say, like, I hear, you know, this isn't just our region, we do this all across the country. We want to feed Black businesses and Black developers with technical assistance and starve them with capital. And we got to change that scenario. And then we are looking to figure out how to help people with down payment assistance, meaningful down payment assistance for Black homeowners who are ready to go into home purchasing. And then we're also just thinking about how do this one is a little more indirect around affordable housing, but how do we get that low cost patient capital to really support people who are doing the development on the work, because you just can't make the numbers work by themselves, right? So we need government to really show up in that space. And we also need to see how like insurance companies who have the slowest capital, you know, they invest for the long term, they are really interested in doing that. And we've been working with some of them here who are trying to bring others nationally to be able to pilot something that insurance companies have never done before. So all of the stuff that we're talking about, I'm not going into all of the detail, but all of the things that we've been talking about in Groundbreak, I like to say we have some evidence that they are possible. Either somebody has done it someplace, we've gotten so close to being able to do it some other place. But the real innovation and the magic is to do it all in the same place at the same time. And so the work that we're doing now is to get people over that, like, yeah, they all came to the table, they nodded their head like, yes, this is what we need to do. Now here comes the hard work. You got to change. So like institutions have to change, right? Like you got to go into your organization, figure out how to sell it. figure out how you're going to distribute and execute money through grants, through loans, through guarantees, because that's a big part of it too. That de-risk loans for Black homeowners or de-risk loan for Black businesses, et cetera. So we're looking at that whole scenario of like, how do you get strategic investments that look like equity for folks, meaning that they get to own something, own part of what their business is. And then also, how do you get market capital to work in alignment with that effort, that equity, so that we actually start to close that wealth gap? So I'll stop talking because I've said too much. Al, we can't hear you.
You said plenty and said it powerfully. Thank you so much. I'll confess that Al McFarlane's mind is blown from this brief presentation, and I'm sure other people are feeling what I'm feeling. Thank you for what you've said. Thank you for being here, for the energy that you are bringing into the consciousness, awareness, and the what sounds to me like fierceness, fearlessness that you're bringing. You reflect a belief that change can happen. I always say, Tonya, too often in the area of problem solving, our people are relegated to being the problem, that we get the misery, they get the money. They make a business out of farming our poverty, our marginalization, and until we do what you have described as a possibility of inverting that equation, things will remain the same. We'll keep being a problem that's marvelous to study and that people can learn and earn their PhDs and their programs from, but nothing substantive will change in the development of the power, the economy, the big word, sovereignty of the community, the voice of the community to both direct and own its own future and be a partner in the entire governance of city, community, society. So having said that, take a minute to talk about that distinction, what philanthropy was, why it was called McWhite Foundation, and what had foundations seen as their role as recently as 25 years ago, and what is so distinctly different about what you're saying right now. Just take a minute on that.
Yeah, well, I will say this. I think that the McKnight Foundation has done amazing work in this community. I really do believe that they have. And I think that McKnight Foundation represented Minnesota of old. I mean, you know, I was like, somebody was just telling me the data, and I think it was like up until 93, we were like still like 97 or 98% white. And so I think McKnight just represented who we were as a state. And I had one of our longtime board members come to our team meeting not recently, and he said, our staff looks like America. And I said, exactly. And so we today are just modernized to look like what Minnesota is becoming, what the Twin Cities looks like. And, you know, as a newcomer to Minnesota, one of the things I've been so struck by is like people would say, you know, Minnesota is so white, Minnesota is so white. And I'm like, no, it's not. And what I think happens is like when you are sitting in the middle of a change, it's hard to recognize that like things have fundamentally shifted, and they've shifted in a really short amount of time. And so part of like what I have is like a new eyes, right, in some ways. And so our not smarts, better smarts or anything, that just really new eyes. And so I think what I see is like McKnight has to evolve. And it's not just my opinion. Our board, it was their opinion. When they took on these twin imperatives of focusing on racial equity and focusing on climate in 2019, and then they hired me a few years later to help execute it, is that the organization had to modernize to meet the moment and to meet the conditions of our region. And so, So that's what I've been up to, is trying to help modernize the organization. So it's not to say that what we did before was wrong. It's that what we're doing today fits the context of today. And so our context is that what we require, I think, in our region, in our space, is change making more than we need grant making. We need grant making too, right? Like we need money going into communities strategically around the kind of change systems that we need to have change. And we need to make sure that that work actually lands in a way that it affects families, right? Like a lot of times we hear big numbers. Somebody gave away this much money and you're like, how did that? Well, I didn't see it. I didn't feel it. It didn't look like it showed up in my neighborhood. And so we got to close that dissonance where we're working on systems, and that system stuff actually makes a difference for families, because our ambition is always scale, but more importantly, our ambition should be impact. And so we want to, so we're a part of our change making is that, and doing the things that I talked about when I said describe trust, like how do we show up as a trusting organization? How do we get closer to people who know what's going on with these issues, who know families who are working on it? I can't do the kind of community organizing I used to do back in the day, but I am trying to make sure we as an institution have our connections and our ear to the ground, and having people who, like Sean, who will tell us is really important, so that we know what's going on and that we can respond.
Tonya, what's your connection? Describe the connection between North Minneapolis and the Global South.
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a great question.
It is a great question. I think that what I would say the difference or the connection between them is that we have the same issues of humanity. Like people in the Global South are like, look, I can't farm my land to feed my family or to create economics that make me work, that make it work for my family to be able to thrive. And I would say that's the same situation in over north, right? Is that we have folks who are saying, I can't find work. I can't find the conditions that will allow me to thrive, that allow me to take care of my families. The economics aren't working. And so part of that is like what we do in our work as we think about food systems in the Global South is really like, this has to be rooted in culture. It has to be rooted. The solutions are with the people who live in those places, who know those contexts. Now we can bring expertise and research and all of those different things, and all kinds of study about different kinds of seeds, but none of that works. I call it content. Content does not work without context. And so that context is, who are the people? What do the people say? How do people act? How do people operate? What, how do they solution? What are their aspirations? And that's the same way I think we think about our communities across Minnesota, but particularly over north.
We've got about 3 minutes. I can take one or two questions in that period. Anybody with a question or comment?
I just want to say, Tonya, this is my first time meeting you. Sean, thank you very much for inviting her. And I think I speak for the group that we definitely need to have you come back on, number one. And number two, thank you for sharing with the North Minneapolis community your vision on the McKnight Foundation, because a lot of people didn't know, and I'm impressed. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Diana.
Sean, we got to hear from you. Comment, Sean?
Yeah, I have a comment. You asked her about the connection to the South, and it's not only the South Hemisphere, but also other places in the globe like Africa. I have a household of 3 kids because my brother-in-law from Kenya cannot survive as a farmer there. So he lived here before and he's relocated, and so now he's driving trucks, and his wife is in nursing. But people globally are looking for opportunities for social mobility. And when they can't find it, they move wherever they can go to. And so, Tonya, I'm so happy you are here. I'm so happy that when I talked to Susan from the Association of Black Foundation Executives saying when stuff was going on with George Floyd, we need help here in this community. And I see you as a powerful actor in helping us. And I know that it's not all on you, but you are going to help us think deeper and more strategic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And I would just say, yeah, people are moving because they want upward mobility. They're moving because they cannot create food. They're moving because climate, it will force people to move. And if we don't really take this seriously, like the level, it's a security issue. It's a it's a humanity issue. And I always say, a lot of times when you hear people talk about climate, it's about how do we preserve the earth? And I know this sounds, the earth will be here. Mm-hmm. Whether or not we can habitate it is a different question, right? So this is a humanity issue when I think about climate, because it will shift and force us to move and act. It will disrupt every human system we've ever put in place. And that's why it has to be important. And we know when systems get disrupted, who is to harm the most and the first. And that's why climate is extraordinarily important to me. And I think we need to be talking about it.
Listen, everybody, thank you all for being here, for your attention. Tonya Allen, thank you so very, very, very much for being here. Sean, thank you for having the insight and the vision. This is the end of our program today. We have an important conversation. We'll be sharing this program on our Insight News YouTube channel later today or tomorrow, so you can get back and study this and react to it. We'll see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.